Hi, and welcome back. So, I want to put together a series of videos covering some of the bumps in the road and unexpected costs that we've had as part of our self build, or not self build, it's a very significant extension and renovation. Um, there's a number of things I hadn't considered when I went into this. We've all watched grand designs and seen the disasters that people have had and the way that costs are escalated. And we had a few examples of that. I've worked on trying to price up every last element that I could as we went into this build, and a lot of that I got pretty accurate. So I priced up my bathrooms and kitchens. I'd worked out what skirting and architrave was going to cost within about £20, right? So I got a lot of the stuff. I was quite pleased, pretty accurate, but there were a number of things that were completely unexpected costs, or where things overran, or where I completely misjudged what they would cost. So I want to share my experience of trying to look at the budgeting and where those things came out and bit us a little bit on the overall budget. So the first one of those actually came in, really quite early on. I've looked at the costs for the architect for the planning and these sorts of things. We put our planning application in, and it came back with a first request from the council for a drainage assessment. And when we looked at the history, the property here, the previous owners had put an application in to build a complete new bungalow at the bottom of the garden, and we have a stream that runs across the bottom of the garden there. And the council had objected at the time due to flooding risk, and that previous planning application, this had never actually carried forward and been challenged in any way, but they quoted this same requirement back at us. And we could have challenged it in some ways, because I looked at it and they said we were building, they basically cut and pasted their objections from the previous application exactly into our one. And our project was nothing like it. They were saying we were building too close to the stream and we were 15 metres from it, all sorts of stuff. But anyway, um, we had to do this drainage report to show how we were going to cover the drainage and flood risk from adding, 2.5 times the roof space, I think, in the end. So quite a significant increase. So I did some research and we found a consultant that would help us with that report. The cost for that was £1,000. I found at the beginning of this project, every you meet takes at least £1,000 out of your pocket, often for not very much. But this guy actually was really good, and if I can find it, I'll put a link into the comments down below. He was very, very helpful. It was all done remotely. And he said the first thing we need to do is a percolation test. And I thought, well, something to do with coffee or something, percolated. It turns out no. So what you have to do with a percolation test, or a BRE 365 percolation test to be precise, is in simple terms, you dig a hole, fill it with water, and time how long it takes for that water to drain away. And that tells you how good the drainage of the local soil on your build site is, allows them to quote a capacity of soak away or other uh, mitigating techniques to reduce the flow of water from the property. So I got quotes for that to be done of between £1,000 and £2,000. So that was someone to come on site with a digger and a barrels of water, dig the hole and do the timing. And we'd already bought a digger to do some of the work ourselves here on site, both in the garden and the builder using it to do the footings and the other work. So the consultant we worked with explained exactly what I needed to do to complete the infiltration test ourselves. Now, we didn't have access to a Bowser, so we had to dig. This was a good way of learning my digger skills, I have to say. Um, dig a hole. I think it was about a metre square, a metre and a half deep. So that was quite an interesting learning curve for me to be able to do that accurately. And then at the bottom of that hole, so that was dug down to where we thought the base of the soakaway was going to be, if I remember rightly. And I had to dig. I dug by hand a more accurate trench in the bottom, which I think was 300 millimeters deep, 300 millimeters wide, and I think a little bit longer than that. But that was all put into the calculations. And then because we didn't have a Bowser, I filled a wheelie bin full of water, because you want to be able to fill this trench quickly and then time how long the water takes to fade away. If you're filling it with a hose, you're sort of messing up the test. So filled the wheelie bin with water, pour it in, and then we have a stick in the water with tape marks on it. And if I remember rightly, we timed the water soaking away from the 75% mark to the 25% mark. And the consultant we worked with was able to use that to calculate the capacity of soak away that we'd need. And you could probably see in some of the pictures that I've shown that we have quite a lot of clay, or there's some seams of clay in the garden, and clay doesn't soak water away very much at all. And if you've got a gravel or a sandy soil, it'll soak away much quicker. So he did the calculations for us, and that came out at a pretty massive, I thought, 11 cubic meters, or just over 11 cubic meters of soakaway capacity that we needed. He did suggest a few other options that you can do to attenuate the flow and to reduce that, but they were things we'd have needed to consider earlier in the design process and possibly change the design and structure of the builds. Those things like having a sedum roof that we could have done on the flat build on the flat roof at the back of the house, um, diverting some of the water off into um, garden troughs and things like that. But we decided we didn't want to sort of compromise and change the garden to do it, and we go with the capacity of soak away that he suggested. Um, and this is just digging a hole in the garden to throw money in for something you'll never see. But be aware that you might well get these costs. I've seen a lot of people on videos that I've watched where they've just said, "Oh, to dig a soak away, you just do 1 meter hole," and it's not the case. And obviously, we were obliged to come back with um, a flood report with a new build. You're likely to have to do a SUDS report of this sort. Um, so worth understanding what that could mean to you cost wise. So for us, that 11 cubic meters, we used Bretman storm crates, and we needed 45 of those. So list price today, that's about £2,000 for the plastic crates. I got them trade, I think it was 12 or 1400, so a little bit less than that. And then obviously got to dig the hole and get rid of the spoil. And I've got my little 1.5 ton digger, and I looked at it and we worked out the size of this hole. I think it was 5 meters by 5 meters square and 1.5 meters deep. So pretty big hole, a lot of material to get rid of, and I don't have a dumper to move it around. Um, that would have been something like 30 tons or so of spoil. So probably at least three, if not four, muckaway lorries at £300 plus VAT that we're paying down here in Dorset. So 1,200, £1,500 of muckaway. So I spoke to one of the contractors that I'd used to do my drive, and got them to quote me to dig the hole for me, help put the soakaway crates in and the pipework in for that, and use the spoil on site. So because of this risk of flooding at the bottom of the garden, uh, and our garden drops away as it goes down towards that stream, we'd kept the height of the floor of the house at the same level. So as we got to the end of our new build, as you may have seen on some of my other videos, there was an 80 centimetre drop. And we had that issue all along the side of the house, and we were just going to look at putting a deck. But decided actually if we put a retaining wall in, we could take all this spoil and bring the rest of the garden level up. And we've got quite a steep embankment along one side of the house that used to be, I think, the side of the railway line embankment here when we had a railway line. So it helped with all those other issues in the garden. Now, they were doing other works for me, putting in retaining walls and garden walls and other things, so it's difficult to break out the cost. But I would assume around £3,000 of um, cost for digging out the soakaway hole for me. So our total cost for this to be installed was between £5,000 and £6,000 extra on a large extension, but an extension, um, just to provide soak away for the extra roof space that we had. So one of those really unexpected costs that we did not expect to see. There are 4, possibly 5 areas like this in the build that were either a complete shock to me because I estimated the budget and the cost for doing that element was way more, or we hit design or other technical issues where we got a bump in the build cost. Now, thankfully, not like some of the horror stories on Grand Designs. We had some contingency and it came within it. But if you're going into a project like this, there's £5,000, £6,000 just disappeared in a hole in the ground for nothing. So, I hope this is of value to any of you that are looking at doing an extension or a self build as to, where these things can disappear. I was worried just with the footings, with bits of footings falling in, which thankfully didn't add costs. But I've seen horror stories of people having to dig much, much deeper for their footings when building control look at the soil type that they're digging into, for example. So I hope this has been of interest to you and of value. It's the first that I'm going to do in a series of videos covering those sort of bumps in the road and unexpected costs as part of a project. Um, it was not difficult for us to do that infiltration test ourselves because we had a machine on site, but certainly digging the hole for the soakaway itself was beyond my capabilities to do that safely. So I hope you found that interesting or of value if it's a project that you're working on. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I hope you found this valuable. Consider doing so. If you've liked this video, please click the like bell. It helps me a great deal. And I really appreciate everybody that's come back to me with questions, feedback, telling me what I've done right, what I could have done differently, and, and all of the engagement that I've had. I really appreciate the time that everybody has given us for um, the stuff we do on the channel. I've learned so much from other people on YouTube channels, and if I can give back and help somebody else, it's fantastic for us to be able to do that. So thanks again for your time.